Our next session, starting here in just a couple minutes, is actually a panel discussion on building a clear vision for your brand. And this panel discussion is going to be moderated by Jacki from Dimoso. Looks like all the panelists are starting to join. So Jacki, when you're ready, I will pass it off to you. Hi.
Hi, Kaylee. Nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you as well.
Oh,
welcome to the stage.
Lovely faces as well. So, hello, everybody. Hi, Dhaunae. Hi, Joe. Hi, Ville.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
So,
hello.
Waiting for one more participant, which is now from Facebook, which I'm hoping to see. I don't know whether you've seen her, Kaylee. Nope. Okay. Okay, great. Well, why don't we just start off with introducing ourselves. I'm going to pick on Ville, who I know very well from our Rovio days. Basically, it'd be lovely for everybody to just introduce themselves, talk a brief bit about their background, and speak a little bit about their brand experience.
Yeah, my name is Ville Heijari, the Chief Marketing Officer at Rovio Entertainment, the makers of these guys. And I originally joined the company in 2010, just as the smartphone market was taking off and Angry Birds was picking up like crazy. And obviously, like that's been like quite a unique journey in building this brand, like sort of native out of mobile entertainment. So happy to be on this panel and happy to hear what the other guys have to say.
Fantastic. And Joe?
Hi. I am a CEO of Genuine Entertainment. So we're a leading producer and brand manager for some of my favorite genre entertainment brands like Alien, Altered Carbon, Blade Runner, The Dragon Prince, Dune, Hello Neighbor. I work with Vampire the Masquerade, our lovely peeps at Paradox over there. As a geek consigliere of sorts, it's my job to work with these kind of brands and help them to understand and explore their potential as a franchise and as a fandom, and help them to grow beyond their core markets with quality and authenticity to produce best-selling, award-winning licensed goods and geekery. Things like books, art books, comics, video games, tabletop RPGs, collectibles, even film and TV development. All the stuff I love as a fan, I help them to make things I would want as a fan of their brands. So doing this for about 20 years now, running Genuine for a little over 10. And before that, I served 10 years as a development exec in Hollywood. So had my experiences there in licensing and kind of paved the way for what I'm doing now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Joe. And Dhaunae?
So hello, I'm Dhaunae. I'm business developer for Paradox Interactive. And I help basically our brand teams to help achieve their goals. So I provide what they need in terms of, they set a vision and this is the kind of products that we need to develop the brand and things like that. So I go out and seek for business opportunities and create these products and experiences for the fan community to have fun and to grow. I've been with Paradox for over 4 years now, but I have been working for World of Darkness, which is one of our main brands at Paradox as a brand concept. I've been working for that one for over 10 years. And it's been a lot of fun because I'm a super fan of Paradox brands.
Marvelous. And Sneha, hi.
Hello there. Hey, everyone. Super psyched to meet everyone else on the panel as well as have a chat amongst all of us. So I'm Sneha Vaidyanathan. I'm a vertical strategy lead for gaming in Facebook. And what I do is help gaming companies understand scalable strategies that they can use to grow their businesses. While I've worked across various verticals at Facebook, prior to that, I used to be a marketer at Coca-Cola. So from the more traditional brand side of things, so very well versed in how traditional companies think about brand and why that's crucial for them. And I've been excited to help various verticals at Facebook get around to the way of thinking about growing and building brands here.
Fantastic. So I'm going to kick off by one of the things we started discussing when we discussed this panel was when you talk about branding and building a vision for your brand, what is a successful brand? How do you define success for a brand? And I'm just going to sort of chuck that over to Joe to start with, because that was something that I think he's really good at helping people with, talking about how to look for that.
Well, I just, it's a passion of mine because, you know, I learned my entire career, really. I mean, when I was a development exec, I was at the Jim Henson Company at a time when genre wasn't a thing. You know, we had the rights to these beloved franchises and Hollywood didn't want them. You know, we couldn't sell the rights to a keychain. And yet I knew the value of them as a fan. And it was really just trying to figure out what your definition of success is. Not just compete in the classic game of just doing everything better than the other guys, but trying to really have some empathy for your fans and try to understand what is best for your brand, and then just doing that really, really, really well and building off of success and scaling off of success and making meaningful premium contributions to your franchise and your fandom and making that be the fuel to drive your success. And I feel so often a lot of IP only try to look at the biggest IP in the world and try to compete with, you know, the Marvels and the Disneys, when that might not actually be the best path for them. Or they may try to jump from A to Z too quickly, when if anybody knows how to build a world and a brand, it's game makers. And so just, you know, build out that skill tree, level up, you know, and so just kind of plot out what you need to do to not only achieve your version of success, but to try to be the kind of brand you wanted to be when you got there. And I think having that foresight to try to figure out what those long-term and short-term goals can be, and just committing to being the best version of yourself and not necessarily the best version of what you think you're supposed to be in the industry today, if that makes any sense.
That's very good advice. What do you think, Ville?
Yeah, I like to think that like one of the core issues is that who are you building for? So when Angry Birds came out, it became this phenomenon that like everybody was playing it, from your baby to your grandmother, and it was like recognized in entertainment industry and Hollywood as like a true 4-quadrant brand. And I think that like at that point it's sort of easy to get lost into it. Is like, what does this brand represent? That is it like everything for everyone, or who are really the key segments, and what are we building for those key segments? And I think that like we definitely paid our dues during some of those early years when we started chasing like different brand licensing opportunities, for example. But today we really have it together in the sense that like, who is like the target audience for like some licensing programs, who are the target audiences for any single one of our Angry Birds games. I think that's something that's it's far easier job if you really build it from the ground up than learn by doing.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I seem to have lost my video. So Dhaunae, could you chip in here and just talk about your idea of what a successful brand would be?
So I think Joe and Ville have already nailed it. It's about having a vision from the beginning and stick to it. Don't deviate just because you try to copy what others are doing. It's also about taking care of your core, have empathy with them. What do they want? What is fun about it? I would recommend to be a fan of your own brand, so that you know this firsthand. Is what would I like to have as a fan? And if I achieve that, everything that I would ever want as a fan, then I would say that you're super successful. So that would be my 2 cents here.
Fantastic. And Sneha, I don't know if you've got anything else to add. I think everybody's saying a very similar thing.
Yeah, I think people have covered a lot of the aspects. The thing I wanted to add is that it's also important to consider whether you're thinking about this brand from a point of view of your game or the overall company. So for example, are you considering a portfolio approach across the various different games that you would have in your business? In which case, then it's important to also think about what each of the individual games stands for, who their audiences would be, and work with a vision in mind for each of those games as well as to how they ladder up to your overall company vision. So having that set, and in fact thinking about that from a long-term strategy point of view, can even inform everything from your visual identity to character development and so on. So I'd encourage you to think about that as early as you can.
Interesting, because What do you think people think about brands that really are not you know, we've talked about what's successful, but what do you think the common misconceptions are? I'll pass
Well,
that to you too, Joe. Yes.
Yeah, I guess, like, you know, again, trying to really set fair expectations and benchmarks for yourself as far as what success is, because I think a lot of people kind of paint themselves into a corner and treat themselves as a smaller brand than they actually are. Like, they'll call themselves niche, they'll call themselves ancillary. You know, they'll think that, well, we can't be bigger things or grow beyond our core because we just don't have that capability, when in reality, there's a lot of these ancillary mediums, and a word I'd love to delete, ancillary, is trying, you don't actually have to be that big in order to be big in these different categories. You know, a best-selling comic here in North America is 5,000 units. You know, tabletop games, you know, 5-10K, and you're already feeling pretty good about yourself. There's brands that have smaller fandoms but are quite more fervent, that are actually outselling some of the largest IP in the world, simply because even though they might have 100 million users or 100 million fans, only 1% of them say yes when given the opportunity to go outside their core. But these smaller brands, 30%, 50%, 70% may come out and say, yeah, I want a comic, yeah, I want a game, yeah, I want an audiobook, yeah, I want whatever. As long as you understand and try to build a relationship with that fandom, like really make that relationship count, so that when you lead the way, when you're saying and investing in your own brand and saying, I think we belong here, come along with us, show your support, then they're actually going to take ownership over that success and understand that what you're doing, everything that you're doing, is worth their time and investment. You know, I think most people don't, most smaller brands don't understand the power of their fandom and the relationship that they could build with the people who could drive and define who they are if just they give them the chance.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I
Yeah.
like that part. Oh, sorry, go first.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Vay.
Okay. So I like that perspective of scale, that like it's not just about that huge scale, that you can still have a unique, strong brand with like a rabid following. But then one thing that I'd like to add is like this angle of like I like to approach, like at Rovio, we're constantly exploring like new IP beyond Angry Birds, many different things. I like to apply this sort of like learn to walk before you start running type of thinking as well. That like you have these threads of product versus IP versus brand, that like don't go into the brand territory first. Like if your IP makes sense, if your product is promising, like by all means, the earlier you set like some of the building blocks for the brand and the franchise in place, the better. But still, like you really have to do this legwork first of building that product and making all that IP work for the benefit of the product before you're in the brand territory.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, I would add something to that. So since you mentioned like the product and the brand, and so many people think that developing a brand is about creating new products, like churning them out meaninglessly. And it's not about that. It's about following the vision of where do you want your brand to go and what kind of experience do you want your fans to have. And it's about creating different ways for your fans to experience the brand that you have created. So effectively, basically creating a transmedia catalog, but it doesn't have to be products. It's just, for example, your forum is also part of your brand, and it's not a product. It's just a way of communicating with your fans. So you have to bear that in mind. It's not like churning product after product. It's the experience that you provide your community with.
Yeah, I can actually add like an angle to that like your business model and the industry you're in has to really support that. Like one of the early challenges for Angry Birds was that we were still, free to play wasn't, well, it was invented, but it wasn't like sort of the dominant force or readily sort of available for most players in mobile. So we were in that 99-cent premium app business model. The only way to grow the business was then to release more apps. So that definitely like affected like the company DNA as well, and the sort of thinking back then. But then, as obviously the market has matured in the past 10 years, that brings its next set of challenges. So you have this IP, and you have this amazing IP that people recognize. Many people are fans of. People download Angry Birds games. That doesn't make it any easier to make games and make those great products.
And I'd say the other really important thing is, while you have a vision for your brand, it's also super important to be tuned in and listening into your community. I think, as Joe pointed out, a lot of the insight that you're going to gather from what you're hearing, your core fans, your core audience, talk about your brand, and to see whether what your vision's actually able to land in that same way to an audience. So I'd say sometimes we see that smaller brands and developers are a little cautious of almost thinking about this as a two-way communication street, and approach this in a very, hey, this is what we are and this is what we want to tell people, without actually thinking that it's almost like a feedback loop. So I'd encourage everyone to also make sure that you have mechanisms in which you're tuning into your own community and learning from them as well. That's your big source of insight.
Yeah. The other thing that I always feel is that licensing, you know, it became a dirty word for a while. And I feel some of it is because the way the business of it is orchestrated, that, you know, you're entrusting your rights to a partner who's supposed to be there in the trenches with you for years, building your brand and doing good work. And the deal making is one-sided and antagonistic. You're looking for you give KPIs to the people generating business for you of just how much you're earning per quarter, and not, did you find the best partner who shares your vision and truly believes in you, would fight and die to make something great for you. And I feel the culture of licensing has been evolving and maturing and healing over the past decade or so. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why IP has been getting better, is because the people who are making these decisions are looking at it from a different perspective, aren't just letting Excel spreadsheets say who should be working on our IP and how many things we should be doing, both internally and externally, not making the numbers dictate the decisions, but actually finding people who engage with your vision and really do believe in it, so that when they become the ambassador and the contributor to your IP, they're just as authentic of representing that and celebrating that as you would be in their place.
I have a question for you, that on Joe. Like, in your experience, do you think that that has also become like more sophisticated from like the data point of view? Like, you don't like just addressing like broad demographics, but in licensing as well, you are really like finding those segments and champions and so forth.
Yeah, I think that data certainly helps. And I think part of that also is the culture of licensing, that, you know, for a lot of times being on the other side of the fence, one of the reasons why I jumped up here is that it was a black box system. You know, nobody told me as a licensor what success actually was, how well we were doing compared to other people. And I feel the freedom of information and learning what actually success is and who is actually listening to you and who is engaging with you. There's so many times we would do an ad campaign and been like, wow, we have a huge audience in New Zealand. And then like, we now know, okay, well, let's do something for New Zealand. And, you know, I feel like having a real collaboration, like something as simple as transparency with this whole process, can only help you to make more informed, inspired decisions. And I don't think that was the case until maybe about 10 years ago, when, you know, genre started becoming popular and all of these things started failing, and because it wasn't authentic. You know, you actually had to be a fan of this stuff to make it good. And so, you know, if the numbers can't show what good is, or can't prove what I did right and someone else did wrong, you almost had to start building better relationships and more responsible, respectful, mutual partnerships with people, so that you can actually know that you're making contributions that'll matter in the long run, if that made sense.
I would like to point out, because I think you touched a very important topic, like numbers versus brand. And sometimes the numbers will not support the brand direction. And you'll have to make a decision if you want to support your vision or if you want to just, get a lot of money potentially by deviating from your original brand vision. So that's a decision that everyone that wants to develop a brand is going to have to make eventually.
In the long run.
Such a very important topic, like numbers.
Looks like Jacki might be having some trouble with the connection.
I think we got a ghost in the machine here.
Yeah. I was curious on that note and on the point, when you're approaching the opportunity for, let's say, a co-branded title or for any partnerships, what are some of the guardrails that you typically keep in mind as it relates to your brand? And what are some of the KPIs that you found to be useful when thinking about how to measure the success of these partnerships and efforts?
I mean, I can comment on the Angry Birds side. Like, we worked with great brands such as Star Wars and Transformers and so forth. And I don't think it's never been like set in stone of what's like off limits completely. Like, we do have like some kind of a moral compass and some kind of a sense of like internally checking like and gauging like what's cool and what's fun and what's surprising. We did, for example, have a brand integration in Game for Peace and PUBG. That was interesting. That was like a bit out there, but like with its own mini games and so forth. So we definitely like flex a lot, and I think Angry Birds in mobile has been like an IP that stretches a lot and can be like very malleable about this as well. But I think that there's a set of values that guide it.
Okay, everybody, I'm very sorry about that. I had what every moderator's nightmare is, which is my computer just suddenly froze. So I suddenly swapped to the other one here. So I missed the last sort of last few bits of the conversation, but I didn't know whether you covered an area that we discussed before, which was what your own personal attitude should be. And I think you touched on it a little bit, Joe, when you were talking about level up and everything else. You know, what should your own, how should you be about your brand?
Well, I guess to start it off, because I'm hyper and very caffeinated, it's basically, you know, really just trying to look at the roadmap and, you know, almost look at your brand as you would a game or some of your favorite stories, and realize that, you know, if you really think you can get to Mordor there and back again by yourself, you haven't been paying attention to anything you love. And so, you know, it's not necessarily just figuring out what goals to go after that are really worthwhile, but to understand that there is a strength in vulnerability, and there's a strength in collaboration, there's a strength in transparency, and really making sure that you surround yourself with people who bring out the best in you and who understand your brand as much as you do and would fight and die for you as paladins and champions of who you want to be, not just who you are today, but hopefully years down the line are just as valuable as a partner and as a friend, to really make sure that you are leveling up in the right direction and investing, you know, those points in the right skills so that you can actually be the best version of yourself. Because there's a million ways to develop a brand and there's a million directions that you can go. And so, yeah, every brand might not know their ultimate definition of success, that end destination that you might feel you need in order to lay that roadmap. But anybody who's ever played, you know, a tabletop role-playing game might know, I mean, it's all about improvisation. And if you surround yourself with the right people who can keep you, you know, aligned properly, then you'll be allowed to grow and you'll be allowed to pivot and you'll be allowed to have those conversations when it counts, so that you can actually make decisions again and again as your brand grows, as your fandom grows, as the industry evolves, so that you are always moving in the right direction, not just checking off boxes and collecting checks. That is not what it takes to be a brand. You know, if you really want to be a franchise and a fandom, it's really about prioritizing making contributions that you're going to be proud of at the end of the day, and entrusting those opportunities to the people who believe in that just as passionately as you do.
Yeah, I think Dhaunae mentioned something when we've spoken before, which was being your own biggest fan.
Mm-hmm.
And having that passion.
Yes, you need to have, you need to be passionate about what, you know, the brand that you are developing. Otherwise, maybe there's something wrong with your brand, or, you know, if your brand is that great, I think you should be passionate about it. At the same time, you shouldn't let this passion of yours get you biased. Mm-hmm. So one good thing to do that I would recommend is, for example, me as a business developer. So you're a business developer seeking out opportunities to develop the brand, but then you have a brand team, or at least one person designated to protect the brand vision. And that is the person that keeps the vision that was originally set, so that we don't deviate from what the goals we set for us and the vision that we set for us. So yes, you can be passionate, but you have to also, if you're the business developer, you have to keep a little bit colder mind, even though you might squeal when some of the pros are related. Yes, I wanted that, you know, but I would separate like the business development from the, you know, from the brand team who keeps the brand vision and protects. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
But can't those two conflict at some stage?
And they do conflict, actually. It's like, mm-hmm. like I mentioned a little bit, sometimes the brand team would need something to happen to hit a brand development milestone, for example, and that at least from the beginning seems to be kind of incompatible from the business development view. It's like it's not super profitable, or it's just spends a lot of resources and it's a lot of uncertainty and things like that. But if you are all up for brand, you need to follow the recommendations of your brand team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in mobile gaming, it can be really complicated when you're thinking about like how do you run live ops for a successful mobile game example, and then if you think about like even brand collaborations or then like licensing programs and so on, how do you like integrate and time and orchestrate everything to sort of not to interfere with your lucrative regular business, but to add to it and complement it, and it can be a complex operation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's also value in thinking about this over the life cycle of the game, as well as of the stage that the brand and the game is at. So naturally at the start, you would have somebody who's able to tie in that vision and maybe resolve that conflict. There could be compromises that you make along the way when, let's say, profitability pressures are higher. And so you'd say, hey, we really need to maybe let go at this point. So it's an ongoing conversation and it happens across, but as long as you also have this as a thought and you're able to, in fact, get your different stakeholders on the page so that at least brand has a seat on the table, I'd say that that's a great starting point.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you touched on, which was interesting, is just the idea of like trying to understand how these things fit into the program, like to actually have them orchestrate and integrate into something that really feels like a user experience cohesively from start to finish. And that's one thing that I feel is you know, it's starting to get better, but it used to just be where every single licensee was on their own island, nobody collaborated or cross promoted. It was very much every one for themselves. And you know, a comic or a game or a collectible, all of these things can release at different times of the schedule, can be user acquisition and retention, you know, the juiciest of words in gaming. And these things can not only do that, but to do it so authentically through a medium, through a community that so perfectly speaks to them in their language, even through people that they already like and respect, and be able to build those connections in ways you never could. And the fact that these opportunities exist and they're not utilized the way that they could to build that Venn diagram of fandoms, to reach out to people who love your IP if given the chance, if introduced in the way that made sense to them, to bring them back into the core. And I feel like if we built more of these, use licensing to build these Venn diagrams more of your ideal fandoms, short-term and long-term, I think the brands could grow more and be the kind of brands that they want it to be.
I think Sneha touched on this ongoing conversation between the business departments, but it seems that you're touching on the ongoing conversation with your community. And one question that's come in was, how early should a company bring the fandom and their community in when they're building the brand or the IP? And is there such a thing as too early?
I mean, I'll point to one of the other brands we work with, Hello Neighbor. I mean, if you've seen their just meteoric success, I mean, they were building a fandom on their alpha and really getting people to get involved with it. I mean, they were having PewDiePie play it a year before it even hit the market, and really showing that if you've got something great and you want to put it out there and actually help them to build you and to have that feedback and have that community, I think, not every brand can do that, but I think that if that kind of back and forth, that kind of relationship can actually help to inform and fuel what you're doing, I think trying to at least have somebody you can trust to think about tomorrow where you're just like, tunnel vision, just trying to get through the day. I think that's the really tough part, that brand building is usually like number 6 on a to-do list where you only get to like 4 if on a good day, and so it's prioritizing your future as much as you do on today. I think you should be doing that from day one. If you're not, as a video game today in this market, I mean, you're kind of missing the point.
I think from a game dev perspective, is there a game today that's not developed like with a Discord server on from day one? I don't think so. So like I think it's like super good to really early on build that like core community, and that's probably where then the absolute super fans come from. But that's like an interesting question then of like what is the vision, like how much does that experience from the community side then, and like how much are you really to compromise and steer your vision? And obviously, like you again, like learn to walk before you learn to run. like maybe you built that product with feedback, but maybe your brand vision is yours.
Yeah. And I'd say it's also super valuable to listen to your early adopters even more, because you know that they're the audience from which you're able to almost scale and build further. So if there's something that's not working, I think that's a great signal to pick up right then. And that'll almost give you like the warning signs of what couldn't work if you were to scale further as well.
That's really good advice. So when you're talking about not running before you can walk, how do you start to walk with a brand? How do you start to, what should your first thoughts be?
Oh God. It's easy to say in retrospect, right? That you just have like a great concept and you tack on whatever your attributes are, whether they're humor, whether they're cartoony. I think it's like you have to this is like the artist part as well. But okay, you do the research, you know what the audience addressable market is and the audience segments you want to reach. So you have like the hard facts down. But at the end of the day, you still like the painter. You have the blank canvas and your palette of things of what are you going to work with, right? And I think that like it's with Angry Birds, it was really looking at like the original game. What is trending? What are people playing? And everybody was at the time playing these flash games, like these physics-based things. And then starting to iterate on top of that like, how can this be more fun? How can this be more sort of accessible? Like, how can this be just stickier? And that's where that whole product came from. And I think that like, then like really early on, the whole thinking of like, hang on, we have these cartoon characters that people seem to love. How can we really build like stories up to that? And like up to 2 Hollywood movies now. So I do think that it's like that core idea is probably like something very simple.
Yeah, and it's just understanding, you know, your fandom short-term and long-term, and trying to understand what would be the most organic path for them. Like, what's the easiest yes that you can get out of them that makes sense to them and makes sense for your brand? You know, are you a visual brand that is really all about interactivity and narrative and storytelling? Well, maybe you should go into another visual narrative medium that you know your audience loves and see if they come along for the ride. You know, are you in a huge IP with a lot of interactivity, but you really want to be a lifestyle brand and you want to be a part of their day-to-day expression of who they are and how much they love you? Well, then there are certain categories that do that better than others. And I think, you know, trying to understand that and look at your IP and your fandom and trying to do things that, as fans, we know at this point what those touch points are, and just trying to do one or two of them to see, okay, well, are we a lifestyle brand? Like, are we a storytelling brand? Like, let's show them what we can do and make that commitment. Us first, say, we are this. Do you agree? And build from there.
I would like to add something. So in the beginning, when you're building your brand, there's a part that some people forget at times, and I think that's quite crucial, which is this brand that I'm building, can I protect it legally? How unique it is? Because then maybe you have a super successful brand that then you cannot capitalize very well on because you cannot protect it. It's not unique what you've built. So I think you should also have that in mind when you build your characters, when you build your world, and these things that can really say, this is unique. This is character. This is my alien race. This is whatever. But something unique that you can protect, because then down the line you cannot change it. Your brand is what it is, and now you know it's a kind of a free for all.
Yes, that's really interesting advice, actually. And when you were talking about starting with brands, often Ville had mentioned, you know, building with the Discord community and with your Discord server, and you might see that some ideas come out of that. And in fact, having sort of worked on the legal side of things myself, from a PR perspective, a lot of the PR work that we can do with emerging brands is actually getting their name out there and getting that brand name out there in the form of thought leadership pieces, in the form of press releases, in the form of blogs, and in the form of community and community discussions, which all lays claim to the IP of that brand as you're growing. So it is a really, really strong point that you're making there, Dhaunae. In terms of your attitude, then you should have, I would imagine, a sort of an eye to protecting your brand and also sort of building that brand. What about when you get a bit bigger and you know, you as the CEO, because I'm imagining there's quite a lot of indie developers watching this panel right now, and your company's growing, your studio is growing, and what do you do when you've got 100 million things to think about? You know, you've got your monetization strategy going on over here, you got your lawyers talking to you over here, you've got recruitment issues going over here. What do you think you should do in terms of your brand when you're growing?
I think it's a good realization that you don't have to build everything yourself. So you can definitely find like veritable experts in this area. Be it from brand builders, just as such as Joe here, or licensing agencies and so forth. I think this is like a great industry that's sort of well catered for.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, a lot of the gaming companies that I work with, they want to own the process. They take so much pride in building out these IP and building out these worlds, and delegation is I mean, that's a scary thing. What if they don't do it right? What if they don't, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. And just having the vulnerability to go out and say, I don't know how to do this, then it's okay as a CEO to say, I don't know the answer to this question. Let me go find an expert and learn. Let me go find an expert, ask questions, and hopefully find somebody that does know this world better than you, who can sit in a room you can't and say things to decision makers that they will listen to in a way you never could, and actually find people to extend who you are and what you're capable of doing, instead of just saying, well, until I know how to do it myself, then I guess I can't do it. Is finding people to bring into your party who can actually specialize in this and make sure that what you're doing is their priority just as much as making a great game is your priority.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's so true that delegation can be scary. But those, for example, that's why you have your brand guidelines for, so that, I mean, if at your core you develop video games, but now you want to have, I don't know, escape rooms, TTRPGs, comics, you have your brand guidelines, and then your approval process, and then you delegate everything that they do in those segments because they're experts. And then they come to you and say, is this okay for the brand? But having followed your brand guidelines. So it's all, you know, it's surely they will adhere to your brand vision. So it's not that difficult, it's scary, but there are ways to let go safely.
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, building things like a brand Bible or a style guide sounds super lame. But if you actually invest time into it and commit in paper to have everyone in the company say, this is what our brand represents, this is what is truly unique about who we are. If you boil this down to the core of our DNA, these are the things that make us special. This is the things that are most important about us and what our fans love most about us. Once you commit that down on paper, you have no idea how easy it is to go and find people to understand that, to see it on paper and understand, even from their perspective, that you understand what is special about you, because that's not often the case. And coming from that perspective really will help to build you in the right direction and find partners who get what is special about you.
I have a comment on one angle to that is like the whole like purpose, like your purpose of your, like companies talk about their purpose all the time. What is the purpose of your brand? Like we worked a lot with Angry Birds to sort of think about that, like okay, this is controversial and this is also negatively perceived and whatever, but we like this sort of anger for good thing, that like there are things in this world that you can get angry about, and you know you can get angry and you can right the wrong and you know you can make things happen. But then at the same time is that like the authenticity, that like are you then like willing to become like an activist brand? Like what do you really stand for? I think that's like the ultimate challenge that every brand then faces, for that, like what is this brand really about? What does this brand stand for? What is the purpose of this brand?
And then I think it's the communication of that. That's why it's called brand communications, and how you tell everybody. And I've seen from a PR perspective, one of the most common errors I've seen happening is everybody communicates the brand outside, but they don't tell everybody inside. And that's the first place. And as we've said, a lot of the qualities of a brand come from your community, bringing them back inside and working through with your teams, then taking those brand, once you define them and put your brand guidelines together and your style guide together, your rules, then telling the outside world is the time. But then keep listening, keep seeing how the community react to that, seeing how your people react to that, and make your adaptations when it's right. Not always, because if you take every single piece of criticism, you'll never get anything done. I've had a question come in from the outside. It said, once, if you effectively brand yourself as a company, as a mark of excellence or creativity, for example, how much easier or harder does it become to build a brand for a new game IP?
Well, I can answer that. I think that like you kind of have an idea of the building blocks, like the whole sort of process of it, and you learn the ropes. Like that's becomes like in a way easier. But then developing that IP, like developing new IPs from scratch, like that is always going to be a challenge. But I think that like thinking about them as brands, you almost have to hold yourself back into not thinking that like, when we're building this new IP, how will I ensure that it will, enable Hollywood films and animated series and anything? And I think that that's again like coming back to my thesis is that like don't put the cart before the horse. Like really understand like how you will navigate it, but you don't have to have it all planned out from the get-go.
Yeah. And I think it's challenging, but it's a challenge that, a publisher has to embrace as much as you would in any other form of media as a publisher, that you are curating a library and through that a legacy. And so if you've earned a reputation, a trust within a community where they know that your brand is synonymous with something like respect or something like quality or something, like cultural sensitivity or something like a certain genre, that is a foundation that you can build upon. And you have to ask yourself every time you do a new IP, well, what does this do for my library? What does this do for my legacy? If I've built this relationship, how does this next expression extend it and enrich it? And is that 10 years down the line really the legacy that I want? And making each IP count, that they don't have to necessarily be the perfect Lego pieces, but everything you do should fit on the shelf together, side by side, and make sense, feel curated. And if they don't, then maybe you didn't have those brand materials at the beginning that said what kind of company and what kind of storyteller or world builder you really wanted to be when you started out.
Great. Well, that was from Martin Cobberston. Thank you, Martin. There was another question from Daksh Bitani. Sorry if I said that wrong, Daksh. As Ville mentioned, when building games, one should keep in mind the trends. Now trends keep changing. How can one stay relevant?
Well, I think it's the brand that's going to help you, right? so it's like I think that like that's you build something that's like more than the sum of its parts. So definitely, like if you really exploit a trend, are you just like are you going to make it better? Are you going to improve it? Are you going to like is your branding, for example, and all your creative work going to make it a better expression of that game paradigm, for example? Whereas are you just like bandwagoning on the trend and probably not putting enough commitment and polish and everything into that game and that project, where it will probably have a shorter shelf life? But I think that like it's like having that stickiness, like that enables you to build like a 10-year franchise or more. Like that definitely takes more than just jumping on a trend. Like I think observing trends is a great way to finding like new paradigms for your company, for your studio, and so forth. But then you're going to need to invest in whatever makes it your product, whatever makes it sticky.
Yeah, and I'd say that riding the trend can help when you're trying to communicate your brand in a certain way, but it needs you to have done that work before to know what your brand stands for. So if you use the trend as a way to define your brand, that's probably where you're in trouble. So I guess in some sense, it's the difference between strategy and execution, where your execution can rely on some of these trends or can help you be more contemporary there. But you try and keep your strategy independent of those trends because you'd want it to last longer than just or not just be a fad.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and I also think relevance is a subjective term, and be careful of subjectivity when making these kind of decisions. Relevant to you could not be relevant to your brand. Relevant to your industry could not be relevant to your IP. And so it's something where you have to be deciding what are meaningful expressions for your IP, where maybe a comic selling 10,000 units isn't a big deal for your spreadsheets, but it just showed you can be a really great storyteller, and maybe that's far more relevant and valuable to you long term. That there may be things that you do for your IP that your shareholders will be like, but is actually a fantastic step in the right direction for you. And so, when chasing trends, I mean, in a normal world where things called conventions existed, we could go and see these petri dishes and see pop culture percolating, and just being immersed in the fandom is a great way to understand which things might be right for you. To see your fans and what they're freaking out about, well, maybe that's something to look at and see if it's right for you. But ultimately, to always keep that in mind of what is relevant to you and who you want to be today and tomorrow. I always think that just trying to take the steps to put you in the right direction and try to bring out your best is rarely going to lead in a wrong direction.
Right. I have another quick question for Molly, Hedy, Carol. Really loving this talk. Thank you all for participating. I have a question. What's the most vulnerable portion of the process of building a brand? As in, if this step is difficult and if it does not go well, the entire project could be doomed. So the most vulnerable portion of the process of building a brand?
I think it's teaming up. So as Dhaunae said, that like you have the Rovio brand, how can you gonna get like 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, 50 people who all get it, like what you're trying to accomplish, and who all love it equally? And I think that like you're bound to have people who are pulling in separate directions and so forth, and ultimately like that could be one big huge obstacle that's standing in the way of your success. But that's just, you know, as extra careful in building that vision. And I guess that like even that early documentation helps a long way to get everybody on the same direction.
I mean, if I could identify one pain point that I think every licensee would agree is the worst part of their day is approvals. I'll be honest with you guys, like it is miserable. And it is a lack of empathy of when deadlines are actually deadlines and how things need to stick to schedules in the way that you would with your IP, having a trusting, conducive, transparent space where you can actually say how you feel about things and what is working and what's not, and getting the root to problems, and then trusting experts to find the right solutions and not just passive aggressively writing a Word document, emailing it, and then just seeing how they respond, but actually treating them as a roundtable partner in a collaboration where communication is key. I think if there's one thing that is the pain point that stops IP from growing authentically, it's not having that trust and collaboration and communication during the development process, so that you're actually talking through the creative process and saying what's working and what's not, so that you're actually moving in a direction where you feel you're maintaining the integrity of your brand, but you're also empowering people to do what you brought them here to do.
I'd say another point where things typically fail is if the person that you've entrusted as your brand custodian within the team isn't sufficiently empowered, then there's that risk of almost having to dilute all the various opinions of the team to what could become like a lowest common denominator idea. So I'd say be careful about trusting or deciding whom you empower with to be your brand custodian, but then trusting them fully, so that if it comes to a situation where if there are disagreeing points of view, that somebody's empowered to disagree and commit and move forward there.
That's great. It all comes back to that sort of first vision, doesn't it? That brand vision. So I wanted to ask my panelists here, what are your favorite brands? Your favorite gaming brands? Now I know mine is Angry Birds. So when I first got to work with Angry Birds, I was so excited. I was literally, you could have scraped me off the walls. Hello. So what are yours? Say, I'll put that to you.
I'd say one of those brands that you could almost think of as a classic gaming brand would be Super Mario in some sense, where anybody who's played that game has had that experience of what the brand stands for. The characters are super clear, and you've seen how the development's gone forward in the various versions and IP. So I'd go with that as just something that you'd see lasting across a really, really long period of time.
Dhaunae?
So I like Guild Wars, for example, both Guild Wars 1 and 2, and the incredible world development that they've done and how they've made the experience for the player be amazing and be so immersive, be a part of that world that really, really feels alive. I think that is amazing.
Joe?
There's far too many to even possibly list. I mean, as far as the gaming brands, my first love was Legend of Zelda. It was the first brand that I really fell in love with, the first brand that made me want to write and made me realize I loved writing in worlds that I played in. And the honor it felt to do that, it really did change. I literally I adapted Legend of Zelda in 3rd grade as a short story. and got an A on it and realized this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And so Zelda will always be my first love. As far as recent obsessions, Disco Elysium is so good. I love it so much. It is one of the best RPGs I've ever played. So it's right up there with like Witcher 3 and World of Bloodlines. Like it's such amazing
Joe, you're
decision making.
cheating. You're cheating. You're saying too many brands.
I know. I'm so sorry, but it's like asking me to go to a buffet and then like, what's your favorite? Be like, it's all my favorite. Why do you think I came to a buffet? Who do you think I am? And so yes, they're all wonderful.
And do they? You can't say Angry Birds now.
No.
And you can't say the Murders either. So
I never had the luxury of owning like an 8-bit Nintendo. So I've been like a fan of the fandom of like how incredible fans these games have, like Mario on Nintendo and Sonic on Sega, like that. How sort of amazing like cults some of those earlier gaming brands have bred. I'm trying to think that like one of my favorite games forever is I started my gaming life on a Commodore 64, and Sid Meier's Pirates was an amazing game, and I mean the guy went on to do Civilization, and now like he's just published his memoir, which is called Sid Meier's Memoir, which means like I guess he's the brand. So Sid Meier is my favorite gaming brand.
That's a really good answer.
That's lovely.
Karen Feinberg said that she didn't quite hear what you said, Dhaunae. For your
What I say about the brands or what I said about Joe?
Your favorite.
Oh, my favorite. Well, I mean, I have many favorites, but I chose just now to mention Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2 because of the world building and the way that the characters could get immersed in that world and feel like they're really, really there. So that's great for brand building.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And in terms of if you wanted to talk about the most recent brands to come to market, what does everybody feel about Fall Guys?
Insane. So good.
I love them so much. I literally think their social media channel is like premium entertainment.
It's incredible.
Oh, it's so fantastic.
It's just like, mainlining Gen Z.
Yeah, it is like the Liquid Schwartz of fandom. It's just like, it's amazing to watch.
It's amazing it's super fun to play and amazing to watch. It's super entertaining.
Yeah, it's a great case study of somebody who is understanding just how to have fun, and every expression you're doing to remind them that this is supposed to be fun. Like it is just a phenomenal case study that is fueling their success, and I hope a lot of people are watching and learning.
Well, that is true. I mean, it's an interesting case to watch right now in terms of the early development of a brand. I mean, the developers behind it have been around for quite a while, and just to see how they're coming into their light and how they're coming into their sunshine, and the sort of communications they're doing and the work that they're doing with their brand is in itself a little lesson as you see it unfolding, from characters through to just what they're doing in terms of their social media. And I think that's an interesting one as well. When brands like Angry Birds first came to the fore, there was no Facebook, so to speak. You didn't have Facebook pages, and you didn't have your social media. You didn't have your Twitters, for example, to really start building the brand. How does everybody feel about the use of social media when it comes to branding?
Well, I mean, it's a huge tool, right? So you really that's where you can also then get to represent like your purpose and values as well. Yeah,
it's a double-edged sword, though. I'll be the first to say that it's very easy to forget that this cacophony that you may be hearing is 50 people. And if you have an audience of 50 million, to just keep that perspective. I've known so many people turn a little bit of smoke into a brush fire because they just are so reactive that they don't stop, breathe, think of what's actually happening and make the right decision for the company, and not just let 4 tweets dictate your quarter. Like, it's just be careful of that.
It's very true. I've just had a question come in from Karen Feinberg, who said, how many of you are involved in games whose mission is to teach advocacy, i.e. environmental issues, food systems, etc., so as to teach younger generations about these issues early on? Or no, which brands do this well? Well, I'm going to go straight to Ville, because I know quite a lot of the work that Angry Birds is doing, and it'd be good for Ville to talk about sort of the thought processes behind that.
Yeah, I think we were always trying to look at like how can we incorporate something like this. So we're not building games with only like this advocacy in mind, but right now we're, for example, in this UN initiative, Playing for the Planet. So trying to really bring like this kind of like environmental messaging and awareness into our Angry Birds games as well.
Yeah. And do you feel that's a really important part of your brand?
I think that's the value piece, right? That you really gotta, like, something that we do as a company, and we live as a company, like we're ready to bring that into our games as well. Like, of course, someone could look at it and say, like, what is this, like, greenwashing, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, not everybody's going to love everything, but if it's important to us, then we will also work to make like an entertaining piece out of it for our fans as well.
Great. So I think now is the time for me to start to wrap up. We've had some really good interactions. I'm very sorry about the middle fuzz when my computer broke down halfway through that the panel. So thanks, guys, for carrying on without me and despite me.
You were here in spirit. That's important.
I was probably here in more than spirit. I don't know whether you overheard the kind of like, get my computer for me kind of call outs. But just before we go, is there anything else that anybody felt that I didn't ask or we didn't talk about that should have been just jumped in on?
I have one anecdote, but I'm not sure if we have time. So I was just stumbled on the statistics in Ad Age from like 2019, which had the automakers, car manufacturers of the world, and how much they spend on advertising per car sold. And this can obviously range. All automakers spend like tens or hundreds of millions of dollars on advertising, and then depending on how many cars they sell, they spend a lot of advertising, like few thousand per car sold, or they spend like a few hundred. And on the bottom of that list was Tesla, with $0 spent in advertising per car sold. Like, I don't believe it. I think they do spend like tens of millions in PR and litigation and whatever. And all the time Elon Musk spends tweeting must be worth a couple of $100 million or something. But still, like, that just goes to say again that like unique product, massive brand, and just has that demand. And typically, like classically, if you think of brand equity, it's about commanding a higher premium on the market. So you pay for more a Porsche than you pay for a Skoda. But in our industry, I think it's all about awareness. It's about being that first choice, having that like, you know, top of mind, that like when a mobile gamer takes a break and they're like, I want to download a new game. What are they thinking of? Where are they going to? Like, who are they going to? Who's the publisher who makes that game? And I think that's the mobile gaming brand equity that really matters and drives our business.
Great. Well, I'm expecting one of our Kaylee or somebody to pop in at any moment to say stop.
Yeah. I've been loving the conversation though, so I haven't wanted to stop you guys, but this is just a great panel discussion. Thank you, Jacki, for moderating, and Ville, Joe, Dhaunae, and Sneha for participating. That was a really good discussion. Clearly, we all wanted it to keep going. So thank you all so much for your time and insights.